the hooch. Good morning, Bear Nation. I am Bear with BearIndependent.com. You should know this by now, but if you don't, you can subscribe and ring the little bell icon and have access to all of our prepping content here on YouTube and our 3 times per week intel briefs and all those other wonderful things. Or you could not. It's entirely up to you. Go where the spirit leads. Today is the 28th of March, 2022. In the build-up to what will very likely be, unfortunately, World War III, which we will discuss now. The European Union and the US are teaming up to reduce European dependence on Russian energy. As predicted in previous reports, the US will be stepping forward to provide liquefied natural gas, or LNG, in Russia's stead. Germany, the European country most dependent on Russian energy, will be drastically reducing its reliance on Russian coal, gas, and oil in the next few weeks as a result of creating new contracts with other suppliers. Surprisingly, even China is hesitating. Al Jazeera reported, quote, China's state-run Sinopec Group suspended talks for a major petrochemical investment and gas marketing venture in Russia, sources told Reuters news agency, heeding a government call for caution as Western sanctions mount. Homemade gummy bears. Post-nasal drip. It's chilly again in Oklahoma today until the sun comes up, in which case it'll be 110 degrees in the shade because Oklahoma's off her meds again. Now, what does this mean for us? Okay, so most of this audience, statistically speaking, lives in the United States of America. Most of you, statistically speaking, are between the ages of 25 and 55 years old, and 88% of you are male. Analytics, bro. Which means that 88% of you are the breadwinners, more or less. You know, and don't get me started on this postmodern era. I think there's many wonderful things that women can and do to contribute to the health and wealth and prosperity of a home. But biblically speaking, 88% of you are the breadwinners here. So how is this going to affect us? Well, if the United States is already in an energy crunch, and we're going to send more energy elsewhere, in this case to Europe, so that Europe isn't dependent upon Russian energy, that's going to serve to create further scarcity here in the United States. And age-old economics, scarcity breeds value. Okay, so the less of something there is, the more highly it's valued. Think of gold in this regard, right? If gold was just laying around everywhere, if I could walk around out here and just pick up bars of gold, they wouldn't be very valuable. Rocks, on the other hand, I have lots of. So, because I have lots of rocks, they're not terribly valuable. But gold bars, on the other hand, I don't have a lot of, so they're valuable, right? Scarcity breeds value. And so this is going to further exacerbate scarcity of energy in the United States, coupled with things like the canceling of the Keystone XL pipeline and the shunning of the petrochemical industry here in the United States of America. This is going to create further issues at the gas pump for us. Not only that, but fuel is a primary input into the entire supply chain, whether it's manufacturing, the shipping of raw goods, the shipping of finished goods, you know, AKA transpo. All those prices are going to continue to go up, which is going to further exacerbate the inflation of the US dollar. The purchasing power of your dollar is going to continue to go down, which is unfortunate. And I could get into the bigger picture of that, but I don't want to right now. Mike Shelby at Forward Observer, I believe a couple of days ago, was talking about on their daily situational awareness brief, which you should be paying attention to as well. There's good information over there. Was talking about, regardless of whether or not the United States spins back up its oil producing, natural gas producing capabilities, the refineries, there's only so many refineries in the United States as well. And there's lag time in spinning those things up as well, the existing ones. And there's no incentive right now to build more of them. And so our capability to refine crude oil into gas, diesel, JP8, whatever you may need, is limited. So there's not a solid long-term strategy right now to increase the production of fossil fuels here in the United States of America to ease prices at the gas pump. So what does that mean for us? I think prices are going to continue to rise on energy, and it's not just gasoline and diesel. And for those few of you that have a need for aircraft fuel, it's not just that, but like I said, it's the inputs into the logistics system, transportation costs, that I think are really going to start to hammer the American public, and that's us. So I've been saying for a while, and I'll say it again, get what you need now. I believe now is a good time to invest in hard assets, physical things that you can lay your hands on, as compared to having money in a bank. Because even if you have money in a savings account, if you're doing really well somehow, surprisingly, in this economy, real estate speculation, Airbnbs, whatever you may be into, the rate of inflation is exceeding the rate of return on a lot of these investments. And so your money's actually losing value when it's invested right now, in most cases. Now, I'm not a financial expert. I'm a guy, wearing a coyote brown jacket in the woods, leaning on his four-wheeler. If I knew everything there was to know about investing, we'd be having this conversation on my yacht. I don't have a yacht. And if I did have a yacht, I'd probably spend that money on something cool instead, like a CH-47 or, I don't know, 1,000 acres of land or more cattle or whatever. The Guardian claimed that the invasion into Ukraine has effectively ended 30 years of globalization. Well, I guess I'll read more of that before I pontificate. It quoted the chief executive of BlackRock. Yeah, I think BlackRock is the third largest economy in the world. Don't quote me on that. I'm trying to remember right now. One of y'all smart people can put it in the comments. But BlackRock is huge. Trillions of dollars. Trillions with a T. Trillions of dollars in assets. The Guardian quoted the chief executive of BlackRock, Larry Fink, who pointed out that companies and governments worldwide will be reevaluating their connections even more so post-pandemic, meaning their global connections, global interdependency. Dependency on Russian energy is certainly the focus, but all dependencies are expected to be assessed, ultimately creating global movement. Fink said, quote, "This decoupling will inevitably create challenges for companies, including higher costs and margin pressures. While companies and consumers' balance sheets are strong today, giving them more of a cushion to weather these difficulties, a large-scale reorientation of supply chains will inherently be inflationary." So what is Larry Fink really saying here in layman's speak? Being globally interdependent has a downside, and companies and countries are starting to realize this when there's a reduced flow of goods and services across national borders. The things that we need are very difficult to get, and or we can't get them. Think of early on in the COVID pandemic when nobody could get toilet paper. But instead of toilet paper, now we're talking about food and fuel and raw goods. Certainly a problem. And what Mr. Larry Fink is saying here is that countries and companies are beginning to realize that this is an issue. And so you see many companies now that are doing what's called nearshoring, which is a fairly deceptive term. Nearshoring means that rather than having their, especially for North American-based companies, rather than having their production capabilities in countries like China, which is not exactly friendly to the United States right now, or to half of the globe right now, and whose supply chains are exacerbated by shipping issues like shipping containers still stuck at port, and production being slowed or halted altogether due to Chinese COVID restrictions in their home country. Rather than being dependent upon that, these companies in North America are nearshoring their production capabilities. They're moving things closer to the United States. Now, in many cases, it's not as close as you might think. It's other Pacific nations, it's South American nations, it's Caribbean nations. But the idea there is that at least they still have open lines of transportation, communication, and diplomacy with those nations as compared to China. And so there's a global move right now for companies and countries to insulate themselves from China, because China is proving to be less than dependent. And see, predictability is profitability when it comes to a company. If I can get my regularly scheduled inputs to produce my products like clockwork, that's predictable. And that allows me to be profitable. I don't have to carry more inventory. I don't have to have, and countries and companies, big ones, are looking at these things right now. I don't have to carry more of an inventory because of the lack of dependability rather, of my supply chains, right? And so I don't have as much capital tied up in inventory. I have lower transportation costs. I may have higher production costs to produce these items in other places, but if I can't get my inputs, my products in the first place, what difference does it make? And so there's a lot of that going on right now as far as nearshoring is concerned. But Mr. Larry Fink goes on to say here, a large-scale reorientation of supply chains will inherently be inflationary, meaning that as countries and companies figure out how to nearshore, aka get away from China, that's going to further exacerbate supply chains, supply and demand again, which is going to continue to drive up the costs of goods and services. What does this mean for you? Again, your purchasing power of the dollar is, I think it's going to be worse tomorrow than it is today. I think it's going to be worse next month than it is this month. I think it's going to be worse next year than it is this year. The Fed, Janet Yellen, and all of her cohorts are basically on record as saying that we're out of moves. We don't really know what to do at this point. And our concern is if we do anything, including even raising percentage points, interest rates 1/4 percentage point, that could trigger an economic collapse in the United States. Oofda, that's a little interesting. Well, economic collapse, or even economic crisis in the United States, something short of a collapse. What type of ramifications does that have for you? This gets back to being independent of the broken, fragile system. Thus, the name of the channel, Bear Independent. My whole goal, and it's a lofty one, but my whole goal is to be so independent of this broken, fragile system that when it ends, somebody has to come tell me a few weeks later, yo, Bear, did you hear the world ended? No, man, I had no idea. I was just out here eating these sheep and making fires in the woods and hanging out. I realize, idealist, maybe a little idealistic, but it's a good goal, right? And I like big, ugly goals. It gives you something high to aim for, something worth achieving. So, again, for you, how do you get yourself independent of this broken, fragile system? The basics: food storage, water storage, food production, security, intelligence, a good group of people to do life with, financial independence. I would strongly recommend getting out of debt. Strongly recommend getting out of debt. And you don't have to take my word for that. You could go see Dave Ramsey on that. He knows a lot more about that than I do. But it's interesting that China now is reconsidering, in some ways, its relationship with Russia, because they've been pretty buddy-buddy up to this point, even engaging in military maneuvers with one another in the Indo-Pac region, Indo-Pacific region. The Guardian claimed that the invasion into Ukraine has effectively ended 30 years of globalization. That could be really interesting. Because the globalists, they're turning the freaking frogs gay. Those people, the people that are making the frogs gay. We've seen this push, throughout my entire lifetime of more global interdependency. But there's a lack of resiliency in that, again, when goods and services quit flowing across borders, which means that there's a potential for a rise of nationalism here. Take that as it may. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has made clear that the war in Ukraine will likely dampen global growth amid the surging prices for commodities. Keywords here, surging prices for commodities. Again, get what you need to get. I think that the window of opportunity for real hardcore prepping is closing. Unless you're truly independently wealthy, unless you have a large amount of disposable income, in which case you don't care what things cost as long as you can get them. But us normal people, we only have so much money to throw at problems. And I think that money is going to be worth less tomorrow than it is today. The head of the World Trade Organization told The Guardian that the spike in global food prices because of the war could cause riots. We've seen this before. Mogadishu, anybody? Black Hawk Down? Operation Gothic Serpent? This food belongs to Mohammed Farah Aidid. This what belongs to Mohammed Farah Aidid? This food. 300,000 people killed in a genocide perpetrated by 4,000 to 6,000 armed guerrillas over food. So much so that 30,000 United Nations troops and the 75th Ranger Regiment and the 160th and B Squadron, I believe it was B Squadron of Delta, and 2 Naval Special Forces units, and Air Force PJs, and a whole slew of other people couldn't solve that problem. We had to go home because we couldn't fix it because of food shortages. Well, that was Somalia. That would never happen here. We've got the President of the United States of America. Asterisk. Remember, who was it? Derek Jeter? Was it Jeter? I don't know. I don't follow the foosballs, but one of those players. Mark McGwire? Maybe it was Mark McGwire. Yeah, home run king. Got an asterisk next to his name because of the steroids. Yeah, I think the 46th president gets an asterisk next to his name. That's just me, though, pontificating. But we've had the President of the United States of America say there will be food shortages. That's interesting messaging. Obviously, it's a position of weakness. And the United States is very weak right now. Domestically and internationally, we're weak, and everybody knows it. But the fact that that's being openly admitted should be, this is a conditioning, okay? They don't, with the exception of Biden's numerous gaffes, the big they, their messaging is something that's highly controlled. It's not accidental, generally speaking, when these things are said. And so it's a conditioning exercise. They're conditioning us to accept the fact that there will be food shortages. What does that mean for you? Stack your food to the rafters while you still can. While you can still get it and stack it. And then the next step from there is your production capability. Battle dog. Come on, look at this guy. Hey, Dad. Hey, Dad, are we doing food scarcity things? Yeah, you'll stay fed because you're a good dog. I make my own food, Dad. I know you do. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala warned from the World Trade Organization, quote, I think we should be very worried. The impact on food prices and hunger this year and next could be substantial. Food and energy are the 2 biggest items in the consumption baskets of poor people all over the world. It is poor countries and poor people within poor countries that will suffer the most. Scarcity, bro. And remember, and scarcity, I believe, will lead to greater regional and international conflict because war at its most basic foundational level is a game of resources. It is the commission of certain resources against the acquisition of or defense of other certain resources. The reason for this is because all governments strive to maintain legitimacy, and when governments cannot feed and protect their people, they lose legitimacy, and then they lose the stranglehold on the sheeple that make up their constituency. And so they have to maintain legitimacy. They have to at least attempt to protect and provide for the people under their covering at a federal level. And if they fail to do that, then you get populist uprisings, getting back to that nationalism aspect we were talking about earlier. And those populist uprisings can and oftentimes do result in the people in power being removed. How's that for a term? Removed. She Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, she also pointed out that almost a quarter of the global supply of wheat came from Ukraine and Russia. Now, I've seen this number fluctuate somewhere between 20 and 30% in the reporting around this issue, but, you know, call it a quarter to a third. A quarter of the global supply of wheat came from Ukraine and Russia, with Ukraine supplying half of the World Food Programme's wheat. I believe that's a UN program designed to supply low-income nations with grain so that those people don't starve to death, to maintain the legitimacy of their governance, which goes to emergency supplies for countries affected by famine and conflict. Furthermore, 35 countries in Africa depend on imported food from the Black Sea region. The consequences of this war could reach around the world, as previously stated. In other news, the White House has been rapidly backpedaling for Biden after he referred to Putin saying, quote, "For God's sakes, this man cannot remain in power," end quote. And after he recently told U.S. troops in Poland, quote, "You're going to see when you're there," which indicates that U.S. troops will be there in Ukraine. You're going to see when you're there, and some of you have been there, you're going to see women, young people standing in the middle in front of a damned tank just saying, "I'm not leaving, I'm holding my ground," end quote. The comments are far too close to calling for the removal of the Kremlin from power and the indication that U.S. troops would set foot in Ukraine. While they may simply be gaffes stemming from old age, both of these comments are directly opposed to the clear narrative previously established by the White House. Now let's take that section of the brief from the last to the first. So the narrative established by the White House, generally speaking, it's my opinion that politicians will do the opposite of what they say they're going to do. And so if they're saying we're not going, that quietly means we're going. And from the contact that I've had with myriad people in and around the United States Department of Defense apparatus, we're going. There's a buildup. There are troop movements. There's allocation of resources. The Defense Logistics Agency is buying up stuff like you wouldn't believe. Our company, Refuge Medical, is in direct competition with the Defense Logistics Agency to be able to secure inputs for our business product so that we have it available to y'all. The thing is, Defense Logistics Agency, because of certain federal acts, has priority, right? This gets back to rationing, BT dubs. Oh, there's no rationing yet. We are deciding who gets what inputs when. We are deciding who gets what commodities when. That sounds a lot like rationing to me, and I think we will see, or we have the strong potential to see, by the third quarter of this year, rationing of food and fuel and other key resources, key material. So, something to be aware of. Based upon the intel and contact that I've had and the conversations that I've had with a lot of people in a lot of different industries who I've spoken to directly or emailed or chatted with face-to-face directly. That's my take on the situation currently, which gives you maybe a 6-month window to really get your poop in a group. And I want to be clear, I hope I'm wrong. I don't want to be right about any of this stuff. I want to raise my children up in the way that they should go so they do not depart from it when they are older. I want to be able to grow old with my wife and sit on my porch and bounce my great-grandchildren on my knee. I want to be able to enjoy my woods and go deer hunting and raise my sheep and eat vegetables out of my garden and, you know, make homemade truck fuel. I want to be able to do all of those things. I would very much so like to be wrong, but I don't think that I am. So much so that I've had a lot of contact lately with some of the older videos that I've shot, a year or two old, talking about the coming food crisis, the coming world war. I've had people saying, dude, these videos were prophetic. I don't want to be a prophet. I don't claim to be a prophet. But to the extent that I'm interested / involved in these goings on, the tactical day-to-day situation is less what I'm concerned about. I'm more concerned about the overarching situation, the strategic situation, long-term situation. And really when we prepare for things like this, what we're doing is providing a bit of physical insurance for the people that we love so that we can maintain normalcy for the people that we love during potential chaos, whatever that chaos might look like. And so my encouragement to you is, based upon the way I currently see things shaken out, is that there's maybe a 6-month window based upon global supply chain, based upon logistics, based upon aggression in Eastern Europe, based upon potential NATO involvement in this war in the Ukraine, before things get potentially truly stupid. So I would encourage you to do what you can to hedge against potential stupidity. As far as Biden's gaffes and backpedaling for the man, y'all know how I feel about that. Now, if you're on Patreon, you've got the relevant links. If you're not on Patreon, you don't. You can find us on Patreon. Go to Patreon, Patreon.com. Search for Bear Independent. You'll find us there. There's always a link in the description down below. And there are myriad videos there. There's about 2,000 exclusive videos, live streams, and posts at Patreon already. And we upload content there about 5 times per week, 5 to 6 times per week. We talked about today the application of precision fires for preppers. Sniper and DMR stuff is the video that's out this morning. And I will be releasing a link to a new kit by demand from Refuge Medical this morning on Patreon, so that they will have a first jump on that, which is a big part of how we run the channel. It's not an I love me, you should love me too channel. I think we bring a lot of value there, and I would recommend you check it out if you'd like to go deeper into this conversation. Now, if you're one of those people that runs away when it's time to talk about how to support the show, this is your cue. I hope you have a blessed day. Now, skedaddle, beat feet, get out of here. If you're still here, let's talk about Refuge Medical. Refuge Medical is my company. It started in my barn 2 years ago, and I spent 1 hour per week packing individual first aid kits. And by the hand of the Most High and by diligent work, blood, sweat, and tears, we, because it's a we now, it's not a me, it's a we, have grown this thing to where we now have kits on 4 continents electively with all branches of the U.S. Armed Forces. Kits in the hands of thousands of law enforcement officers, EMS and firefighters, and thousands of civilians here in the United States and all around the world. Yes, we do ship internationally. I found this in my barn when I was cleaning my barn the other day. This is a list of my inventory from 11 June 2019. My inventory, to give you an idea of how far we've come, was 1 complete bare fac, 4 trauma kits, 3 pressure bandages, 2 chest seals, 6 triangle bandages, 2 decompression needles, 7 tourniquets, 3 nasopharyngeal airways, 1 package of compressed gauze, 3 mylar blankets, and 1 pair of shears. That was the entirety of the company assets. And praise the Father, and thanks to y'all, we've exceeded that greatly. I think there's many of y'all listening to this brief right now who have acquired more than that for yourselves from refugemedical.com. And I thank you for that. I thank you for supporting our small businesses. You guys know the promo code that you can use is BearNation, and that gets you free shipping on everything in the store at refugemedical.com. Wound care buckets for your long-term wound care and long-term preparedness. Those are in stock and they're shipping quick. I have a pallet of these pouches arriving within 2 weeks per my supplier. This is the BearFac 3.0. This is mine. It rides around in my backpack. I have a set of shears on the outside, and I've added a soft T tourniquet to the outside. As you can see, it's handmade, made in America, guaranteed forever, hand stitched. I mean, look at this. And boy, do they hold up. Yeah, they hold up. If you break this thing, I will replace this thing at no cost to you. Don't care. No questions asked. I really want to know how you broke it so that we don't have more breaks, so that we can make it better and better and better. But hassle-free return policy and exchange policy. You broke it? Cool. Here's another one. Now, if you use this kit to save a life, and 35 lives that we know of have been saved to date, We replace the contents that you use to save that life at no cost to you as well, because the whole reason this company exists is to save lives while in service to the Father's kingdom and experiencing the abundance of his provision and blessing. And abundance doesn't mean I have a yacht. Abundance means I get to live here and do this with y'all, okay? And there's 18 families that are supported by this small company. And I can't say thank you enough for allowing us to be in a position to be able to employ those 18 families so that they can earn a living wage, so that they can pay their bills, so they can do meaningful work. You pop the lid open on this Bearfac and you pull the inner out of the outer, and now you're holding in your hand a purpose-built trauma kit. Not a boo-boo kit, a trauma kit. And it's designed that it can be deployed with one hand, because we've had 2 people who have saved their lives with these kits that didn't have their other hand, okay? They literally got blown up and they were missing their other hand. This whole thing is designed to be used one-handed if you had to. So you got a 6-inch pressure bandage here. You've got your tape, surgical tape, and it's retained with this Velcro, so it'll pop right out. You've got your Sharpie here. You've got a CAT Gen 7 tourniquet from North American Rescue, a pair of gloves. In the back here, we have what we call the stack. We've got 2 high-fin chest seals, full size. 7¼ inch North American Rescue EMT shears. These are excellent shears. Listen. These are not cheap garbage shears. We've got a burn tech dressing for dealing with wounds, or burns rather. Nasopharyngeal airway. 2 5x9 gauze pads. That's in your stack. And that's your airway and respiratory module right there, as well as burns. And so prioritization of care, massive bleeding. This is the M in the March algorithm. March is massive bleeding, airway, respiratory, circulation, head injury, and hypothermia, and then everything else. So massive bleeding is 9 out of 10 of our most prevalent problems is right here, massive bleeding, okay? Then we have airway and respiratory. That's this module right back here, the stack. Let me put my tape back so we can continue this conversation further. And then down here, we have our everything else, circulation, head injury, hypothermia, everything else. And so I've got quick clot rolled gauze in here for wound packing if needed. And then we have what we call our trauma pack, which is down here. And this has, and you can see it's sealed in a high quality poly bag. You don't have to worry about it getting wet or dirty. You've got an eye shield and an eye pad for eye injuries, head. You've got compressed gauze also for wound packing or for wrapping injuries. You've got a triangle bandage for same. You've got a roll of Kerlix gauze, same. You've got an emergency blanket here, or a burrito blanket as it's known, to maintain the body temperature of the casualty. There's reasons for that, but this is the hypothermia portion. We've got fold flat duct tape in the back here because it sticks to everything, including blood, sweat, and tears. We've got a bunch of 5x9s, 2x2s, and 4x4 gauze pads here for minor injuries, abrasions, whatever else. And all that's in the Bearfac. And the thing to understand with the Bearfac is that this is not a, it's not a boo-boo kit. It's not designed to be a boo-boo kit. It is designed to save lives. It exceeds military specification for an individual first aid kit. That's why there are so many of these bought electively by the United States military, because it's way better than the IFACs, individual first aid kits, that they are issued. That's why I made it, because I was pissed off at what the Marine Corps was issuing as a standard IFAC. So that's the Bearfac. And like I said, I have a pallet of those pouches arriving in 2 weeks. Your promo code is BearNation for free shipping. And then this is the SOB, smaller the back kit, okay? It's the same concept, except it's much smaller. Designed to be run on a war belt. Also works really good on a plate carrier. You got your CAT tourniquet on the bottom here. Pull this open, same concept, red handle. You pull this and it comes out like so. And now you're holding a purpose-built trauma kit in your hand. And inside of here, you've got your Sharpie, you've got your pressure bandage, you've got combat gauze, fold flat duct tape, a pair of gloves, compressed gauze for wound packing here. There's 2 compact chest seals and a nasopharyngeal airway in here as well. Can you see them down in there? Okay. So everything you need, nothing you don't. for dealing, again, working the March algorithm in a very tiny, compact form factor that weighs as much as one loaded AR magazine. And handmade, I mean, look, handmade, made in America. See that? Made in the USA. Guaranteed forever. If you break it, I'll replace it. If you use it to save a life, I'll replace it. And I guess last thing I'll tell you is we had a request for the inner pouch of this SOB here as a standalone kit. So we did that. Here's my pocket. Watch this. Here's my pocket. Here's my pocket. And that's like, I don't make this up. I carry this around in my pocket everywhere. As you can see, it works, made in the USA. And it's that exact same inner from the SOB right here. Pressure bandage gloves, Airway, combat gauze, chest seals, Sharpie, compressed gauze, right there in my pocket. So I carry that in the pocket of my cargo pants, my cami pants, but it would also fit in a glove box or a backpack or a whatever, a purse. And then of course, because I'm me, I've got buku tourniquets in my other pocket as well. So refugemedical.com. I know I'm running off at the mouth here. I apologize. refugemedical.com. You can get all this stuff. Promo code is BearNation. And refugetraining.com. If you don't know how to use this stuff, come see us at refugetraining.com. Our class dates for the year are up at refugetraining.com. So find a date that's relatively close to you. Plan for, save for, come see us. Whether it's level 1, which is the March algorithm, massive bleeding, airway, respiratory, circulation, head injury, hypothermia, everything else, situational awareness, and lots of hands-on reps with your kits. And the cost of the class includes a trainer kit that you keep, that you take home with you, that has a pressure bandage and compressed gauze and a trainer tourniquet. It's a real tourniquet, it's just blue. A tourniquet and chest seals and blah, blah, blah. It's got all that stuff in it. That's yours, you keep it, you take it home. Or it's the Responder 2 class, which is CPR and AED. It's an add-on module to Responder 1. Or Responder 3, which is all that stuff in a dynamic setting with induced stress, with lots of reps, plus blue guns for force on force and active shooter response and barricading doors and tackling people and triaging and treating multiple casualties in a mass casualty incident and all of that. That's the Responder 3. Or the Essential Responder, which is all of those put together in a 20-hour course of instruction over the course of 2 days. It's a 2-day class, 10 hours day 1, 10 hours day 2. And day 1 is Responder 1 and 2, and day 2 is Responder 3. All that's at refugetraining.com. And if you use promo code BearNation for that, you get 5% off. I'd love to give you more off, but I can't. I don't have the headroom built into our pricing on any of this stuff. And they're small class sizes. There's a lot of trainers out there that their class prices are comparable to ours, maybe a little bit less than ours, but they have 50 people in the class. We don't do that. We like a high instructor to student ratio. And so we have maybe half of that, maybe half the number of people in the class. So you're getting real hands-on time with the instructor. You can ask questions. We can correct you in the moment. And the whole idea there is we want you to leave better than you came. You need to understand these concepts when you leave. And there's been multiple times where we've had students that just weren't getting it. They weren't allowed to leave until they got it. That's the whole point, to maintain that low number of students in the class so we have a high instructor to student ratio. So that's us. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for supporting the channel here on YouTube, for supporting the channel on Patreon, for supporting our small businesses, Refuge Medical and Refuge Training. I really appreciate y'all. I hope you have a happy Monday. And I'm just thankful that my life looks the way that it does. And that's in large part because of you. I appreciate y'all. Have a blessed day. Shalom.